welcome back and welcome to our next presentation, which will be by Jimmy Falkbjer from Resurs Bank. And Jimmy's joining us from Malmo. And thank you very much for taking the time, Jimmy. We do appreciate it. Before I hand over to Jimmy, just to remind you that you can visit our sponsors' stands in the virtual exhibition hall simply by clicking on the button to the right of your screen. Have a look around. There's lots of content and the opportunity to meet them and start a discussion. And also, you can ask questions to Jimmy by clicking on the live Q&A button. I will see those on my dashboard and I'll be able to put those questions to Jimmy at the end of his presentation. Without further ado then, Jimmy, I'll allow you to introduce your topic, which is of course on microservices, a very, very important technical challenge, the implementation of microservices that a lot of financial firms face. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you. Jimmy.
Share my screen and I hope you can see it now. Well, hi all, and thanks for having me here at QA Financial Forum. My name is Jimmy, and I work as the principal architect for software here at Resurs Bank. In this session, I will share how Resurs Bank have moved from a monolithic architecture to a world of microservices, and where we try to automate as much as possible. So, to get some background of what we had back in 2017 when I joined Resurs, I want to highlight some things that appeared pretty soon. That there was a do and use what you want mindset. If a team started to use framework A for something, then another team could start to use framework B to solve the same thing. So there you were with two frameworks that accomplished the same thing. After a while, you stand there with a lot of frameworks, and it's very hard to keep up the competence in all of them. Coming from Handelsbanken, where it was very strict to bring on new frameworks, this was quite new to me actually. And by having all these frameworks, you easily fall behind when it comes to maintenance. You discover that some applications are running Java 7 with an end of life that had passed a couple of years ago. Spring was a framework that was used, and also that was lagging behind. There were a lot of monolithic applications with functionality locked inside the monolith from others to use. And this led to duplication of functionality instead of reusing it. A lot of manual testing was needed before you could take your change to production. And bringing up new service for test and production had quite some lead time and slowed things down. And when you eventually should deploy to production, it often failed the first time and perhaps the second time also. And that led to that you had to postpone the deployment until the next week. So after a couple of months, you kind of set up a wish list in your head for a new environment to run your software in. What if we could embrace microservices? It should run as containers. Security should be a first-class citizen and be brought in as automatic as possible. Secrets, well, they should really be secrets. No more passwords, tokens, API keys, and so on should be seen in our version control system and be known by everyone. We should have a clear separation of concerns of who does and see what. When frameworks get a new version, we should not wait to jump on it. Try it out and make it reach production as soon as possible. We should not fall behind anymore. We should have a common pipeline that can take code from developer to production in a fast, stable, secure, and compliant manner. And please, no more deployments at 5 o'clock in the morning. Let us do them during standard working hours when people are at work and not sleeping. Of course, we should still embrace new technology, but in a little bit more controlled manner would be preferred. And we should automate as much as possible. If we have a manual step somewhere, we should always see it that if it can be automated instead. Luckily, there were more people at Resurs that were thinking like this. A few of us, both from operations and from the developer side, started to take a look at Kubernetes in May 2017. Kubernetes looked really promising, and it felt Like this is the platform for us to run our containers in. We tested and tried things out during the summer, and it was a little bit harder than expected in some areas. OpenShift came up as an alternative after the summer, and it felt like a good decision to go with OpenShift, being backed by Red Hat and having the support that they could bring to the table. In December, we got to go. We should bring on OpenShift to Resurs. A few developers and architects started planning for the microservices that needed to be built and also setting up the pipeline. Operations started setting up OpenShift on-prem, and until that was in place, the developer used the cloud version, OpenShift Online. In February, the services was running in the cloud was moved to the OpenShift test environment, running on-prem. It just magically worked. That was the first proof that we were onto something good. We had a deadline for the beginning of April when the services needed to run in production, and we managed to keep that. We had 12 microservices running, plus an API gateway in the new environment. And an important aspect of our new environment was the ability to deploy to production during working hours. But that goal alone is not good enough. In a large research regarding the best way to develop and deliver software was published in the Accelerate State of DevOps report. It basically states that the more deploys you do per day, the better. If you are an elite performer compared to a low performer, you will deliver software with less risk to fail. You will have a faster time to recover from incidents, and the time of committing the code until it reaches production is way faster. These were all things that we also wanted to achieve. And I can say that today we are in the elite category, or at least very close to it. So what does our pipeline look like that makes it possible for us to be in the elite category? Well, the developer works on the microservice in her environment. As much testing as possible should be done here. The developer is able to spin up more microservices locally, but if the microservice has dependencies to other microservices, the dev environment can be used to them. When the developer is satisfied with the code is committed to Bitbucket. Then our pipeline kicks in. Jenkins sees the commit and starts to build and test the service. Common checks of code quality is performed, and if everything looks good, a Docker image is built. The Docker image is scanned for vulnerabilities and pushed to the Docker registry. Now the pipeline generates the necessary configuration for the service to be able to run on OpenShift. That configuration is pushed to Bitbucket. So now we have a new desired state for the dev environment, and that is the whole idea of GitOps. But the new version is not running in the dev environment yet. For that, we have Flux. Flux looks in Bitbucket for the desired state and sees the new version and applies it to the dev environment as a rolling update with no downtime. And all of this is done completely automated. When the service seems to work fine in the dev environment, the developer promotes the new version to integration. Nothing is rebuilt, but new manifest files are generated and published to Bitbucket for the integration environment. Again, Flux sees the new desired state and does a rolling update of the new version to integration. Here, external clients can also perform their integration testing, so it's very important to deliver high quality to integration. So the final step, going to production, the developer promotes the version to production. Again, manifest files for production are generated, and the pull request to operations Bitbucket is created with a change. Also, a ServiceNow change request is automatically created. No developer needs to manually create them. Operations sees the pull request and merge that pull request into master. And the same procedure again. Flux wants to make sure that the desired state of the service is reflected in OpenShift and does a rolling update of the service with no downtime. The manual check by operation is something that we are investigating if that really is needed and can be skipped. With this pipeline, we really thought that we had a golden path, an open highway to deliver software from code to production in a secure, stable, and automatic way. comparing with the old way, where it felt like you were queuing all the time, and perhaps sometimes also were driving against the traffic. Who doesn't want to be on the golden path? The answer to that question might feel very easy, but it shows that it is not as easy as one might think. The pipeline is only one capability of building up a golden path. There are so many more capabilities that needs to be managed and agreed upon. At the same time, old habits are very hard to change. We came up with a list of several capabilities. A list where every capability needs an explanation and a status. The status is to keep track of the health of the capability. If the health is bad, then of course the golden path is bad and needs to be fixed. For instance, if we take container orchestration, our container orchestration platform is OpenShift. If we stop upgrading, we eventually will run on a version that has reached end of life. That in turn could mean that we no longer can upgrade another product since it depends on a newer version of OpenShift. You get into a loop of bad things. This is not a position we want to end up in. Also, many of the capabilities can be solved in several different ways and with several different tools. But we want to stay consistent and have one way of solving it. It is of most importance that it is clear what should be used when trying to solve a problem. If I, for instance, need to use a distributed cache, one can just look at the golden path and see what is recommended and just use that solution. But even if you think that you have built the best thing ever, you need to sell it to the rest of IT. I believe that building software should be fast, fun, and bring value. And the golden path should help in doing just that. Aligning to the golden path should be something that is the right thing to do, and choosing the golden path would be the easy choice. At the same time, the ones that maintain the golden path needs to really keep it up to date so it doesn't break. The golden path must be trusted. And as we said before, stay consistent. If we, for instance, use Redis as our distributed cache, use that and don't look elsewhere. It is much easier to support one distributed cache over many. Saying all this, it is important to state that you don't have to follow the golden path, but that decision should be really hard to take. The golden path should be every developer's first choice. To be able to get alignment of how we build software by following the golden path, we needed to come together way more than before. We rearranged our architecture forum that previously only contained architects from development. Now it also includes IT operations. A new IT strategy department was created, and now we have a solid group of people with different competences to bring into the decision making. One golden rule is that no one have a higher ranking over another person in the forum. All are equal. We have even found an RFC of how we should take decision that builds on a rough consensus among the members. So no voting. Instead, we always ask ourselves, can I live with this decision? Even if I don't think it is the best, it will still solve our problem. This has proven to work very, very well. But if we cannot agree, we have a process for that. But that has still not been used, actually. The first thing that reached a consensus in the architecture was the service definition. When we have developed all these 12 microservices that was now running in production, you get a pretty good picture of common features that they had. If you wanted the next 100 services to look the same, we better make sure we define what they must be able to accomplish. If everyone follow these rules, it will be much easier to build tools for automation. What I really like about this service definition is that it is language independent. Even if we today code all our services in Java, there is nothing in this definition that say we can't code in Go, for instance. Just as long as it follows the service definition, you are basically good to go. But bringing on a new programming language just like that and not telling about it is nothing that we promote anymore. Here comes the architecture form in play, where information can be spread and a rough consensus can be agreed upon. So, what is a microservice at Resurs Bank? Well, first of all, I want to say that the microservice cannot just do one thing at Resurs. Most of them have several endpoints and does many things. But the things a microservice can do at least belongs to the same domain, like cards, accounts, payments, and so on. We don't have any rules of how small or big a microservice should be. I think that every developer and architect at Resurs have a great feeling of what will work just fine. And when it's time to split up a microservice to two, they just do it because they have that feeling. We also have a lot of shared libraries that we have developed. The first ones were sprung out of the first 12 services that we made, and now they lay us a foundation for every service we do. These shared libraries makes it very easy to comply with our service definition. So the natural choice is to use them, because then you will follow the service definition automatically. Anyone can develop a shared library, but it is the development experience team that owns them. The development experience team consists of developers with several years of experience. This gives us a really good foundation for our microservices. And it is rare that we find bugs in the shared libraries, actually. Most developers can now focus on coding business logic. They don't have to start from scratch because they have this great foundation to rely on when they start. And last time I checked, we had around 25 different shared library components. And I would say that these are key to stay consistent in how we build our microservices, as well as being fast building them. If you see service A, B, and C as one monolith, you can say that it represents what we had before. Some tests were made in dev, and then the package was moved to integration. More tests, mostly manual, were made, and then finally ending up in production. But in a microservice world, you cannot continue like this anymore. New versions will appear all the time, and they still need to play well together, no matter what. So service A and service B appears with new versions. Service B is moved to integration. After a while, a new version of service A gets to integration, and then service A is rapidly moved to production. Service B that was running in integration for a while will perhaps never reach production for some reasons. And the new version appears in the dev environment and quickly comes to integration. Now service C comes in play with a new version and needs to be rushed to production with a bug fix, perhaps. All these scenarios and more needs to be handled if you want to keep up with continuous delivery. There is no way of keeping steady versioning in the environments, we have found out. You just have to deal with this, and having automated tests is one of the keys to see that you don't break anything when a new version of a service comes to life. Having a lot of test environments before reaching production doesn't solve the problem. The fewer the better, I would say. When a developer is done with the feature she has been working on, let it flow to production as soon as possible. If you really must hold back the feature, use feature flags or toggle systems to make sure that the new code will not run in production. Or even better, you can use feature flagging to make code run for just certain users, or for users only running within a specific network. The rule is to not stop a service from reaching production. I would say that is key. When you have your service running and you want to make a change to it, there are some rules that we need to follow. This is to make changes easier to manage without actually breaking the contract of a service. our microservices can always add new data in response to a client. We don't see that as a breaking change. The client must always be able to handle unknown data. And the same goes for a service. If unknown data is sent from a client to a service, that data is just ignored. But what about the breaking changes? Sometimes they do come up. Well, early on we said we must try to avoid breaking changes as much as we can. Design your contracts with that in mind from the start. A year ago, Sam Newman released the book Monoliths to Microservices, and that is a must-read for the ones that are going in that direction. It was quite nice to read about the parts regarding breaking changes. Sam has 2 rules about it. 1, don't break contracts. And 2, see rule number 1. He might be kidding a little bit, but the essence of that statement is still very important. Try to avoid breaking contracts. But if you must, create a new endpoint, deprecate the old one, and give clients the time to migrate to the new endpoint. It shouldn't be harder than that. So how have we moved on from having those 12 microservices in production back in April 2018? Well, for around 5 months, we improved the pipeline. More shared libraries were developed and some bugs were fixed. We created a demo project and some basic documentation came to place. And in September, we were ready for other development teams to start to use the pipeline and follow the golden path. One funny story is actually that a team that was not belonging in IT, but belonged to the business heard of the new environment with the pipeline, and they wanted to get in. That onboarding was really smooth, and they went to production quite fast, following the service definition and using the golden path. The last team to join the pipeline was in May last year. Then all teams at Resurs had something running in the new environment. Far from everything, but still something. For this configuration, I took a look at the number of services that we are running today. And today we are having 125 services that follows the service definition. We also have 20 services that we call legacy services. And that is because they do not follow the service definition, but they still use the pipeline and the new environment. And then we have 17 web applications also. So if we take a look at some numbers, we can see that the first 2 years in production, we have made around 1,200 deployments to production. They have been made during working hours. We started deploying once a week as before, but it soon became 2 days a week. But today I can say we basically can deploy on any day of the week. It is very rare that we roll back something that has been deployed to production. We are much more stable in our releases nowadays. Since everything is infrastructure as code, a rollback is just a Git command away. Also, we now have full traceability of what, who, what, and when something is changed, thanks to having all configuration as code in Git. And when it comes to how far we have come, we have around 20% left to migrate into the new environment. So we have come pretty far. We managed to convince the developers that this is the way to go. I have some key takeaways. If you're about to do the same things that we have done, start and succeed with a small team. Make sure your golden path is the place where developers and operations want to be. When something breaks, you really need to be fast to fixing it. Convincing people to use something new that doesn't work great, well, then it is hard to do the convincing. When you have something that you are sure will make life easier for developers and operations, but at the same time migration work is competing with business prioritization, that is a real pain. You need to be able to articulate the benefits of moving from monolith to microservices to get the time to migrate. Focus on continuous improvements, since you will never really be done. If you think you are done, the health of your capabilities in the golden path will soon be red. And then you have a broken golden path. And finally, it is so hard to satisfy everyone. Sometimes you just have to accept that we cannot approve on everything. Just some final words. Everything that I just said might, of course, not suit every company. Each company is unique and needs to figure out their golden path and way of working. But a couple of weeks ago, I had a 2-hour session with a company here in Sweden. They have a service that most Swedes use at least every week, I would say. What I presented to them was basically this material, but with a lot more details. And when we were done, I got an email 10 minutes after the session was complete. And it said, "Many thanks. Very interesting. You just described my target picture." And with that response, it makes you think that we might actually have done something really good here at Resurs. Thank you.
Well, Jimmy, thank you. Do you mind? Yes, you've stopped sharing. That's great. So we can see you again. Thank you for that. Really interesting. If anybody has a question for Jimmy, we've got a couple of minutes. Just hit the live Q&A button at the end of to the right of your screen, and you can send a question to Jimmy. I have one though, Jimmy. In the meantime, great presentation. Thank you. You talked in your key takeaways about the challenge of scale and starting in a controllable way. Now, you're well aware, I'm sure, of the case of TSB in the UK, a relatively large bank, which 18 months ago saw its online operations crash for three weeks because of a major failure in a transition program. Afterwards, when there was an investigation, one of the findings, and this was discussed in the UK Parliament, was that the management and indeed the technical staff didn't fully understand the technologies of microservices that they were trying to introduce. So that's really to your point about scale, I guess. But my question to you is, can you see that, and do you agree that for a larger financial firm, microservices, the application of microservices is perhaps exponentially more complex? Or do you think there are simple things to do?
No, I think microservices is the way forward. If you take a look at Monzo, for instance, in UK, they have, I think, 1,600 microservices. So I don't think it's a problem if you're having 5 or 1,500. I think this is the correct way to go, because you can try things out so much easier. If you get a new programming language that will suit you better, for instance, if you want to run in the cloud, you might not want to use Java anymore. Then you can try that out in just a little microservice and see how it works. In the monolithic world, you couldn't have done that, actually. So I still see this as this is the way forward. And you can scale up individually. You might have a service that is only used just a little bit. Why should it take up the resources in a fully blown monolith? Let it just be microservices.
Okay, great. We do have one question that one of our delegates has sent in, so I'm going to read that out. I'm sorry, I can't really paraphrase it because I haven't had time to do that. But what was the major challenge you faced at Resurs Bank with implementing microservices? Was it a cultural challenge? I guess by that we're talking about the challenge of bringing the entire team with you in these major technological transitions.
That's the thing, because we have great developers that are used to work in one way, and when you come in and try to change that to work in another way, that is the hard part, to convince people that you shouldn't be doing what you have done before. You should do it this way. That is really, really hard. I think now that this is accepted because we have seen the results of it, actually. But it is still hard, and that it can't be neglected. Information, that is key. And that's why we had those 5 months in the beginning to really make sure that it should work. But we have improved for every day. We improve the pipeline and the golden path and stuff like that. So it's information, and people must want to do the change. That's key.
Okay. Jimmy, we have to end it there because we have to end on time. Thank you very much. That was great. Just to remind everybody, visit the virtual exhibition hall, click on the blue button to arrange meetings with our presenters. And I have to hand over to the next session now. Jimmy, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thanks.